Hi, I'm Dan Schinder. Welcome to Drum Talk. I'm here at the Bobby Morris building with Bobby Morris. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me and my crew here. We're very excited about it.
It's my pleasure.
Really, really appreciate it. Funny thing is, Bobby asked me earlier, you said, how did you find out about me? It's like everybody knows Bobby Morris. Bobby Morris, in case you've lived under a rock for the last 60, 70 years, Bobby has worked with a flash in the pan you may have heard of by the name of Elvis Presley. You played with Louie Prima for, what, 10 years?
Yeah, Louie Prima, Kelly Smith.
Yeah, and you also were the band leader for Barbra Streisand.
Yeah.
And you worked with Bobby Darin.
Bobby Darin and...
some guy named Buddy Rich.
Buddy Rich.
Has anyone out there ever heard of Buddy Rich? You worked with Buddy Rich.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Great. Tell us, I have to start with some obvious questions,
Yes.
Bobby. Tell us about your work with Elvis Presley and number one, what you did and what were things like back then? I mean, it was a different world in a lot of ways.
Well, yes, it was. This was around 1969, and I was musical director for the International Hotel in Las Vegas. And so Colonel Parker came and asked me if I would also be interested in being his conductor and playing some percussion. So I said I would be, but I got the permission from the hotel to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I became officially his conductor, and I traveled. I met him in Hollywood, and they took me to MGM Studios, RCA Studios in Hollywood.
Right.
MGM is where he did all his movies and all that. And they brought me into this special room, a dining area, and all the executives of RCA Victor were there. And on one side I had Elvis and Colonel Parker, and they wanted me to sit on the head table. I said, no, let me just sit over here. I didn't want to be that,
You didn't want to upstage anybody.
I don't want to upstage anyone. He says, no, you're the man, and you're our guest here. So, anyhow, we drove to. They took me into the studio and all over the recording studio. Showed all the million selling records and the movies that he made and all that. It was very interesting. Then we drove to his home in Hollywood, and there was a bunch of little girls outside screaming and scratching away at the limousine. And I spent the next couple of weeks there, and we went over many tunes and kind of put together his show. And tunes like Suspicious Minds, In the Ghetto, Memories, eventually they became very big hits for him.
And if you don't mind, I want to ask you something about that process. Being a drummer and a percussionist as a conductor and band leader, I feel that that's got to be a bit different from any other type of musician as a conductor and band leader, because your sense of rhythm is primary, correct?
Yes. And I took some classes at UNLV, conducting musical direction and all that. So I had an idea. Basically, a drummer, the main thing is the time, for a band. Once you get the band set in the time, it is not necessary to wave your hands. But on the rubato things, it could be, it's necessary, especially, when it's on ballads.
Right.
So, but we opened up at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, and but prior to that, I had quite a career of playing drums and different people. But I wound up as band leader. For some reason, they Harry James was supposed to have the band.
Oh.
And but he the last minute, I feel like I'm in a strap here.
Oh,
I can't move.
Here, lift your foot up. There we go.
So,
So were you asking were you pitching yourself?
Harry James was supposed to be the band leader, but he changed his mind last minute. So Mr. Miller, the entertainment director, asked me if I would like to be the band leader at the International, because I was already doing the thing at the Flamingo.
Right.
I said yes, and so I wound up, getting the band together, and it was quite an orchestra. Full rhythm section, full saxophone section, brass section,
right.
and strings, about 22 strings.
Mm-hmm.
Then there were the Imperials and the Sweet Inspirations, and his personal players, like Ronnie Tutt, good drummer, wonderful players, So it was tremendously successful. I mean, I don't know what to look. You want me to look over there?
You could look at me there and there. You could look at Karina, wherever you're comfortable looking.
I'm looking there, and there's I see myself on the screen.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was very successful, and it started the Elvis thing, and became the biggest thing happening in the entertainment business. Bigger than anything that I've ever
seen since, probably,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. You were there basically when the term and the style rock and roll was invented, basically, right?
Yes.
When all that came to fruition.
Yes. For years prior to that, I was doing many recordings at Capitol Records in the rock thing, and Will Gilmore was the A&R man, the engineer, and he kind of like asked me to come in a couple of times a week and do about 3 sessions a day in those years, because I guess he liked the intensity that I had, in our recordings with Louie and Keeley and the Wildest, and they call it the Wildest,
right?
And all that, and so and that was a situation that lasted for a couple of years,
right.
And it was a wonderful. I played for I don't even know who it was. They just said so and so were doing a rock day for whoever, and we would come in and play, and with the ear, and they would hear a voice, and it was wonderful, and it paid well.
That's great.
Very well in those days.
How do you feel about rock and roll, quote unquote, enduring all these years?
Well, I think rock and roll has like progressed into this fusion rock, and one of my favorite drummers, Steve Smith, is wonderful, and Dave Weckl and Greg Bissonette and friends.
Right. So these are some of the contemporaries that you appreciate now, right?
Yes, and it evolved into a kind of a jazz fusion thing, where prior to that it was basically a rock beat, that type of thing. And then it evolved into jazz and rock, and it became like so interesting and so wonderful that I listen to it all the time, and I try to play that kind of a style, because that's the modern age.
Yes.
And if anybody hasn't heard those people, Greg and Dave Weckl and Steve Smith, by all means get their DVDs, because they're so interesting and so wonderful and so exciting.
Yeah, and I have to say to the audience, this is coming from a man who, A, was one of the first double bass drum players, and B, is credited for inventing, if I could use that word, the shuffle beat. So, I mean, for you to have a reference to those other players is a big thing.
Well, let me tell you how the shuffle beat evolved.
Okay.
I was working with a jazz group, my own jazz group, in the lounge at the Sahara Hotel, the Casbah Lounge, and Louie Prima and Keeley came in with a band, but it was a band that was they were playing big band things, cut down to a small band, so it wasn't quite happening. Anyhow, we had the jazz group at that time. Jack Prince and the Paupers, Bobby Morris, jazz band, whatever. So Sam Butera came and got a hold of me. We were running sessions at the Black Magic in Las Vegas. And he would sit in along with many of the great saxophone players and players at that time, like Stan Getz and Al Cohn, Zoot Sims, Frank Russolino, trombone, Carl Fontana, just wonderful, wonderful players.
Right.
And so Sam came in and got me, said, Louie Prima would like to have you come over to his house and talk to you. I said, about what? He said, well, about maybe joining the group. So anyhow, I went to see Louie, and he kind of hypnotized me. You know, he's got a hypnotic spell about him. And he said, I'd like you to join the group because we're missing like that link that we feel that would make it successful on recordings.
So you literally were the missing link.
Yeah. So he and I said, well, I don't know. I have this jazz group, and we're working steady. We were working opposite them at the time. So he said, well, we're going to do the Frank Sinatra special, the Colgate Comedy Hour, Perry Como show, Dinah Shore every 2 weeks. We're about to sign with Capitol Records, but I need you, you know, to. So we agreed on the price, which was more than what I was making, and that had some bearing on it at the time. But I said, but I have an idea. That I noticed that your drummer is playing a shuffle with two hands, which is ding 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 on a closed hi-hat. I'd like to play the whole thing with one hand, the left hand, against time on the right hand.
And was the right hand on the hi-hat or the snare as well?
The right hand was on the hi-hat, and the left hand was on the snare, and the right hand would go on the big cymbal too.
Okay.
So it started off ding-a jinga 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 jinga. So just the gigolo, you know. So we got together at his house, and I played this shuffle thing that I had in mind, never anticipating that it would be played at those kind of tempos. That he wanted it at every tempo.
He wanted,
you know,
to use it
because to play it at this tempo, you know, it's like, well, that's. But anyhow, it's what it is a dotted 8/16th note, and it's accenting 2 and 4.
Okay.
So it's against time. But then when you pick up the tempo, then when you go faster, up there. So that's how it evolved, and I never anticipated us playing it at that tempo, so I had to come in and practice about an hour every night before we started.
Your own
That's
beat.
right. Because, no, to play it, I never anticipated playing those kind of tempos.
Yeah.
So.
And what were those tempos? I mean, were they like literally like? Often could it be that fast or faster?
Oh, much faster. Yes, faster.
Yeah.
In other words, what you were doing just now was like half of it.
Right.
It's jinga 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 ding 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 ding.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Playing the full shuffle.
Yeah.
Which
And everyone watching right now is saying, well, why doesn't he pick up the sticks and show us? Do you want to show us?
Well, it's hard to show on a tight drum. I would, you know, but because the time is on the cymbal.
Right.
So you're playing the shuffle. But you want to accent 2 and 4 to get that feel.
Yeah.
So that's how it evolved, and I started, you know, recording a lot of people, and Keely Smith did her own recordings, and she flew me in, and on staff was Shelley Mann and Alvin Stoller at that time. That was Reprise Records. and I know we opened up with When You're Smiling and the Chic, and it was like this tempo. When you're smiling, that tempo up there. And I heard in back of me, and from Shelley, oh my God. Except he was using profanity. Oh, crap, you know. I said, what's the matter, Shelley? Yeah, I turned around. He said, something wrong? I thought maybe I was doing something wrong. He said, how the hell do you do that? So anyhow, we became friends. And it started a thing, and I didn't realize how it progressed. I did the Nant show a couple of years ago, and there was all these drummers, Yamaha guys that were with Yamaha at the time. I don't know if Steve Smith was with Yamaha, but they were all there, and they were all performing on stage, and I was introduced in the audience.
Oh, nice.
And they all came, I said, my God, I felt me?
Yeah.
I mean, here you are, like, oh. Anyhow, he said, no, man, you really created something. So that's how it started.
That's great. And it has really endured.
Yes.
I mean, you still hear it in new music today of different styles.
But, that Jump, Jive, and Well became very big, and they flew me to San Francisco. I did a Louie Prima Keely Smith tribute with Louie Prima Jr. So we did the the Jump, Jive, and Well became a national big hit.
Right.
And I had about 20 drummers in the back of me, and you still got to play the shuffle and do the kicks, with your feet,
right.
And then you boom, 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 while you're playing the shuffle.
Right. Very polyrhythmic.
So it was just wonderful, and they sent jets for me on quite a few occasions.
That's great.
And to play some concerts there. And with wonderful San Francisco musicians and all that. So it was just marvelous.
I have some more, if you don't mind, drumming questions for the audience.
Of course.
My audience is made up of
Yes.
drummers and percussionists from over 70 countries.
Yes.
We all have different backgrounds. We all have different influences. Some of them have been playing a year or 5. Some of them have been playing 55.
Sure.
And what I want to ask you, Bobby, is what basic advice could you offer to any drummer of any style, of any length of time having been playing? What are some basics that we must not forget?
The most important thing is perseverance. And I started studying with Henry Adler at the age of 10. And Freddie Gruber took lessons before I did. We became very dear friends. And Freddie, as you know, taught was one of Steve Smith, Neil, Dave Weckl. So anyhow, Freddie and I have been very good friends ever since.
That's great.
So, but the main thing was I was 10 years old, and I would practice on a drum pad. Okay.
Right.
And you have to practice on a drum pad to develop your technique and develop your rudiments. So I would take a lesson. It was $3 a lesson at the time, and I would go from Brooklyn to New York, the hotel that Henry Adler was teaching at, and but I would practice about 8 hours a day till my calluses. Freddie and I, every time Freddie would take his lesson, Henry would say, "Come on in here, Bobby. Come in here, Freddie. Here, Bobby. And like we were trying to like outfast each other. Out rudiment. Because we were playing in paradiddles, and rudiment cues and all the roles, and which I want to indicate to the drummers out there how important that is.
Thank you, because I was going to ask about that. A lot of drummers take it for granted and don't want to spend the time.
Rudiments is, you practice the rudiments and you try to develop speed, but the rudiments come in very handily and very when you're performing. And especially in drum solos, it gives you flexibility.
Right.
But the more time that you put in practice, the more you're going to get out of it. There's no shortcuts. If you want to develop strong, good hands, good fingers, good technique between hands and feet, and coordination and all that.
Right.
And you know, Jim Chapin was a very good friend of mine, and as you know, his book is very successful.
Absolutely.
The syncopated coordination between hands and feet. And it's a wonderful book. He's a wonderful man, and unfortunately just passed away, as did Freddie Gruber.
Right.
We were at the show in New York for the drum show, and they filmed most of us, you know, especially the ones that had passed away. Buddy Rich, Louie Bellson, and Freddie Gruber, different people, you know. And it was an amazing show.
And all you guys were good because you stuck with your rudiments and you developed them to apply them to your overall
right.
playing,
And because I stuck with my rudiments and because I worked so hard, I was able to incorporate it in whatever type of music. Eventually I wound up with Latin bands. I wound up with Greek bands, playing with the Greek music, you know, like 9/8 time and 7/8 time and 5/4 time.
And knowing the rudiments gave you that flexibility.
Right, and I wound up doing drum solos in that time signatures. But with the rudiments gave you the feeling of like the knowledge that you needed to perform and to play any kind of style. And when I first started, you know, I worked on 52nd Street in New York. It's a jazz street, and I was working at the time with Chuck Wayne and Gene Denovi, and we were working next door, and everybody's saying, "Oh, there's a band going to be opening up," you know, and from Harlem. I said, "Well, who is it?" They said, "Well, it's Charlie Parker on alto, Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet, J.J. Johnson trombone, Bud Powell on piano, Max Roach on drums."
I love Max Roach.
And so we all went over to see him between our sets, and I was with Kay Winding, who was at the time a trombone player for the Stan Kenton band. So I'm sitting with Kay, and JJ opens his solo 8-bar thing, and Max Roach, you know, and it goes into a thing, and Kay's walking out of the club with his trombone. I said, "Where are you going, Kay?" He said, I'm gonna go across the street, and I'm gonna put this trombone, and I'm going to let the first cab run over. So anyhow, because JJ created such a marvelous thing, and so did Max Roach. Now that was all based on coordination of and syncopation and the development of hands and feet against time. Okay,
right.
And that started a whole new trend in drumming.
Syncopation and polyrhythms and whatnot.
That's right. Yeah. That prior to the jazz fusion thing now, there was bebop. You know? Right. And the bebop thing was a time thing going, with the left hand complementing the right foot, and the left foot basically playing time. But then what happened between the right hand and the left foot, and the left hand, was amazing things that were creating at that time in drumming. And I know basically drumming is what your bag is, what you do, and
absolutely,
and God bless you for
thank you.
Promoting. But things evolved in drums. But as I said again, you get what you put in, and if you don't practice, don't expect to get too much out of it.
Right.
So you've got to work hard, develop your hands, develop your fingers, develop your reading chops, your syncopation chops,
Mm-hmm.
get your technique going, study all kinds of music, Latin,
Yeah.
jazz, Greek, whatever. Show, for years I played with show bands, and every night I would play for a different show in Las Vegas. And people like Judy Garland and many people like that were the stars. Frank Sinatra, the
Right.
Rat Pack, played the original for all the artists that came,
Yeah.
because they didn't carry drummers with them at the time. But one time, Betty Hutton came in, and she had a drummer with her, and his name was Remo Belli.
Aha.
Okay.
This guy right here.
That's right. Remo Belli. And Remo was wonderful, wonderful. And I wanted to play a show, but it was so intricate, so some acts would bring their own drummers in, because
Right.
they Las Vegas had very good players, but sometimes they hit clubs around the country
Mm-hmm.
where the players aren't that good. So they want to make sure, and especially drums. Drums is a very intricate and very
Right.
important. Drums is the most important instrument in a band.
Definitely.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
give you another example. One time I couldn't show up to do a show, and Sugar Ray Robinson was on the thing, and George Burns.
George Burns, okay.
And Sugar Ray would open, and we would do a thing together, fours and fours and fours and fours,
Yeah.
between tap dancing and drumming. And so anyhow, one night, because at that time there was only one way to get across from the west side of Las Vegas to the east side, and that was through the Charleston Underpass. So there was a big rainstorm, and the underpass flooded, and I couldn't get through.
Just couldn't get across.
I couldn't get through. To make a long story short, the show did not go on that night
Wow.
because I did not show up.
They couldn't just throw any other drummer in because of the intricacies of what you knew. They couldn't just get a stand-in for something like that.
They couldn't because, well, first of all, not only that, but the fact was that it was so spur of the moment they couldn't anyhow.
Right.
Even if they could, they couldn't
Right.
because of the time element
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I'm just trying to point out the importance of drumming, and how underrated some people think drums are. Drums are the most important instrument in an orchestra, and
Absolutely.
drums is what carries, what sets the groove, what sets the mood, what sets the time, and what sets the whole aspect of the musicianship and the musical bag of the orchestra. Without drums, you don't have an orchestra.
Right. And
You got an orchestra if the saxophone player doesn't show up,
Right.
if a trumpet player doesn't show up.
Right.
But drums is the most important instrument, and people don't realize that. But perhaps maybe if they watch Dan here, Dan Sugar, and the show, they would realize how
thank
important the drums are.
Thank you very much. It's from a listener standpoint, it's what the listener taps their toe to. It was they bop their head to.
Yeah.
It's what they sway their hips to. It's what Elvis did all those moves to. In fact, can you get up and show us your favorite Elvis move?
No, I'm not an Elvis impersonator.
This book is Early Rhythm and Blues, and in this book is it's Spotlight On, and it's Fabulous 50s Part 1, Louie Prima and the Birth of the Lounge, Jump, Jive, and Wail. And in this picture, which camera should I show it to? Can I? I'll show it over here. In this picture is a picture of Bobby Morris, who was one of the very first players to play with a double bass drum. And I noticed, not in this picture, one of the other pictures in the Elvis book, I noticed, and this is real gratifying for me, I noticed that you didn't have any front heads on the bass drums. I haven't had a front head on the bass, on one of the kits I use, I haven't had a front head on it since 1983. people thought I was nuts, and still do for many reasons, but that's one of them. What did they think back then when A, you broke out a second bass drum, and B, you said, I'm taking my heads off of these things, I just want them to breathe? What kind of response did you get to that?
Well, it gives it a different type of sound. In other words, instead of like a piercing boom sound, it gives it more of a thud type of sound. And it gives it a more pleasant sound too.
Okay.
And double bass drums, Louie Bellson and I believe, were probably the first ones, and we were both at the time with Slingerland drums. And I was traveling with for Slingerland for many years, and it became quite important and interesting, and many drummers picked up on it, because what the double bass drum does is it gives you freedom to do things with your hands, and accenting and copying the things with your feet that you're doing with your hands. So it gives you another avenue of expression.
Right.
And it's a wonderful. I feel very comfortable. Sometimes now when I don't play with double bass, I feel kind of lost, because I got so used to playing with double bass drums.
Right.
No, not that you need to use double bass drums all the time. A double bass drum is only used for like solo work, or for
fills,
certain accents
maybe,
and fills
like that,
and different things, and that you could incorporate.
Jump into a double time.
That's
for a
right.
transition,
Yes,
like
and make it very, very exciting.
Yeah.
It's just a wonderful innovation playing two bass drums, and it opens up a whole new drumming.
It does, and I have to say, just on a quick note, Slingerland has a special place in my heart, because my two smallest drums and my two largest drums are Slingerland. When I was about 9 or 10, I had a 5-piece Pro kit, and my parents got me a pair of concert times, an 8-inch and a 10-inch, and they're Slingerland.
Right.
Fast forward a few years later, in 1977, after my father took me to see Led Zeppelin, I said, I have to have a pair of timpani drums.
Right.
What kid asked for timpani drums for their drum kit? Well, I was playing them in concert band and orchestra as well.
Yeah.
They found a pair of timpani drums that were being sold by a gentleman who you might know by the name of Mel Zelnick. And Mel played with Artie Shaw back then.
Mel Zelnick is wonderful.
Yeah, and he had a music store near our house in West Hills, California.
Sure.
He happened to be selling them. I have Mel's old Slingerland pedal tune timpani drums from, I think, the late 50s. I'm honestly not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's when they're from.
I see.
So when I see Slingerland, and right now we'll show an old Slingerland ad featuring Bobby with Slingerland drums, it's pretty neat. They're vintage, and they still sound wonderful. I have them set up with my kit now still.
As a matter of fact, I got Buddy Rich with Slingerland. He was with Rogers Drums.
Right.
And we became very good friends when I was with Louie. And one time, if I may, I tell you a quick story.
Sure, absolutely.
Chick Heaney was a drummer with Freddie Bell, and wonderful lounge group. And Buddy Rich and Chick were very good friends. Now Buddy came in many times to see us, Louie and Keeley, at the Casbah Lounge. But I never went over to say hello to him, because I figured, I'll say hello, and he would say, oh, it's your drummer, big deal, bye, whatever. So I didn't. So anyhow, as I was passing by their table at the Old Silver Slipper, Chick Heaney said, oh, no, I said, hi, Chick, how are you? And Buddy grabbed my arm. He says, hey, what do you have to do, win a damn downbeat pole before you say hello, I said, no, Buddy, because I'm sorry, but I thought that I'd come over and I would introduce myself, say I'm a drummer, and I said, no, Bobby, I wouldn't fluff you off.
That's really nice.
I wouldn't fluff you off, man. The reason I've been coming in is, like, my God, man, how do you do that?
That's really
like
cool.
those tempos, from Buddy. So we became friends, and I helped him put his band together, and later on we we did some traveling and some touring. And
Right, you kept his band in shape, basically.
well,
right?
Buddy is such a magnificent player that I would play down the arrangement, then he immediately, like he had such unbelievable, impeccable ears, that he would play it like without, like in moments later,
Right.
and play it all down like completely the way it was without reading, because he had the ears to do it.
Right, that's really cool. I have another picture I'd like to show. This is a great book that's also good for working out your arms for drumming, because it must weigh 15 pounds.
Right.
It's called Sticks and Skins, and I'm going to open up to a page here. Hopefully I could do this without falling off, but here's a great expose here on Bobby Morris right here. And I was telling Bobby when we were peeking at this before we actually started filming, that I didn't realize you'd been here since 1950. Wow.
I was quite
It's a
young.
long time.
Quite young. I wasn't able to go into the lounges then because I was underage.
Right.
So you have to be over 21 to.
Yeah.
But
Just
yeah,
really cool
I've been
stuff.
in Las Vegas since they had 5 hotels: the Flamingo,
Wow.
the Thunderbird, the Desert Inn, the Desert Inn, the El Rancho, and the let me see, Sahara. No, not the Sahara. The Flamingo, the Desert Inn, the Old Frontier. Okay, the El Rancho.
Was the Golden Nugget up yet?
No. And the Thunderbird.
Thunderbird.
And the Thunderbird. There was the 5 hotels. There were 2 stories high, and
Wow.
and there was 30,000 people all told in Las Vegas, and North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Boulder City.
I think we have 1.5 million now just in
And
Vegas.
everybody knew each other.
Yeah, right.
Everybody knew each other, and anywhere you went, everybody, all the pit bosses would say, "Hey, Bobby, have chuck wagon." They called it chuck wagon
Yeah.
that time, not buffet.
Right.
So anyhow, but one quick little story is I played for all the jazz, Chet Baker and Benny Carter with his big band. I was the only white guy on the.
And tell everyone who
band.
Benny Carter was.
Benny Carter was a great saxophone player. He was always voted in Downbeat as #1, and he became an orchestra leader for musicals and movies, and he had one of the best big bands, kind of in the Count Basie, Duke Ellington mode.
Right. And he opened the Moulin Rouge.
He opened the
right?
Moulin Rouge,
Yeah.
and so they hired me, and I was the only white guy in the band, and of course, and I felt honored, to play with all these great players, and so that was a very big opening, and Benny Carter was a wonderful saxophone player.
Oh, that's great.
But then I wound up playing, going to San Francisco, and I played with Chet Baker and Wardell Gray and Sonny Rollins and people on that basis.
Oh, what experience!
And Oscar Peterson and Pettiford and many jazz players, of the day.
Right.
And Dizzy and Charlie Parker. I played with, sat in with them and played with everybody at that time.
That's great.
But it was a wonderful experience and a wonderful life, and it all came from drumming, from practicing, and from practicing your rudiments,
Right.
and like paradiddles, Radamucues,
I was going to ask you before we wrap it up.
Would you like me to play?
I'd like you to maybe show me something, maybe what you do and feel is a good warm-up for just some sticking, maybe before you really cut loose on your drum kit, or what could you show me that I could show everybody else at the same time?
Absolutely. As a warm-up, don't warm up on a drum. You warm up on the drum pad.
Right.
Okay, and do everything slow. In order to develop speed, you want to do everything slow. And as you hit the drum, just bring it back, accent, and bring it back. Let it flow, and okay, and that's, do it very slow, and then do the same thing with up, put it all the way up. Yeah, there you go. See, that'll strengthen your wrist.
And get more motion.
Okay, now to get your left hand and do with the hand, you start off with doing that, okay?
Right.
Then you do it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then you do triplets, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you speed it up. You can work with a metronome. Eventually, you could get it up to that speed.
Right.
But like I said before, in order to get speed, you've got to start off slow.
Right.
Everything has to be slow. And you want to develop your hands, and you want to practice your rudiments and paradiddles. Like okay, double. Up the speed, it'll go. So
yeah,
and you could go faster and faster.
People are used to seeing me play like this.
Like that.
Yeah.
Right.
I have lately. I've been practicing more like this, which is how I started out, like we all do.
Right.
And sometimes I play French grip. Sometimes I play German.
Right. Then there's, rudiments. And then you do the triplets. You do the triplets all around the drums.
Yes.
And accenting, and it sounds.
Yeah. Now you're playing the.
Yeah. Then you do offbeat paradiddles. In fact, in the fusion thing, they're using that.
Yeah.
The foot. Yeah, and you get the left hand.
Sounds cool.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
thanks.
That's good.
But I'm going to go and practice.
But you do it all
around your
drum.
kit, right? And I think
Now,
what
if you do triplets, then you use all the drums.
You're dealing them out, dealing your
accents. And you could do
out.
parallels on the drums too. Now, we had drums here. Do it around. You do it all around the drums, so you get, and then you could do like triplet
crossover. There you go. There you go. You could do a lot with triplets. Yeah, I think when there's a lot of people that haven't had any education in music, but they start playing an instrument, and I think when it comes to drummers, often they slough off the rudiments because they think it's all about just right here on a practice pad or a snare drum.
Yeah.
But as you've just said and demonstrated, when you get your rudiments down, that's how you can incorporate it to your solos and your fills and
all around, and do a flow, do a circular and reverse circle all around the drums, and practice that. Get your arms involved, not just your wrists and your fingers. Get your arms involved.
Exactly. I'd love to have you on again next time at
Sure.
my studio where we do have all those
Oh,
drums.
you have all of that?
Oh yeah, and we'll have you sit down at my drum kit and demonstrate some of
Oh,
this.
yeah, of course.
Before we go,
Yes,
I'd like to ask you to do something really special for us.
sure.
What I'd like you to do is, I'm going to move this drum out of the way so the camera can get you. I'd like you to sign that seat. I want you to be the first guest to sign that seat. I have a pen here. Because that's the seat that eventually we're going to auction off for a very special,
Sure.
very special cause.
Sure.
So if you want to sign it right on one of the cheeks of the seat, it's like
How do I get up?
Yeah. There you go. You're okay now.
Okay.
And I'll move this out of the way.
Okay, the seat where?
Anywhere on the cushion. You're the first. You need to,
Right here? Or?
right anywhere.
Oh,
yeah,
here.
like any of the black spots. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And this seat, eventually, sometime during the year 2013, we're going to auction this off. It's going to be signed by a lot of guests. Bobby Morris here is the first. Thank you.
Sure.
And we can sit back down as we say goodbye to everybody.
Sure.
And we're going to auction this off, and we're going to donate the proceeds to a very special organization that you're going to find out about. I hope you've enjoyed being on Drum Talk. I have really enjoyed it. I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Dan.
And reaching out to our audience all over the world. Like I said, I'd really love to have you on again at my studio.
It's a pleasure.
Play
The
some
main
drums.
thing with the drummers out there is that work hard, practice, and have perseverance. And don't give up. Just keep working, keep working, set a goal for yourself, and keep working towards that goal, and don't stop till you reach that goal.
Thank you for saying that, because my philosophy and what this show is built around is not all lessons come in a practice pad, a snare drum, or a drum kit. A lot of lessons can be learned from discussion. And I think that if everyone's really paid attention out there, they've learned a lot from the discussions we've had about your experiences and your philosophies on drumming. And again, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Pleasure, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining me. Dan Schinder here with my special guest, Bobby Morris, and we'll see you soon.